But protesting ain't gonna do shit.
I just want to know when the we light the torches and get the pitchforks.
We are the generation that has to do something.
Pretty soon, this right here, it's gonna be our only way about it, this shit.
I think I'm willing to die for this.
We can't wait till November. There's no waiting to the ballot box. We need to get to the bullet box.
I'll be brutally honest, I see an insurgency brewing.
Well, I think it's safe to say that Americans have finally reached their breaking point, as evidenced by the fact that so many of them are now talking openly about a literal revolution, either through peaceful means like a general strike and mass mobilization, or through an armed revolt. And this kind of revolutionary fervor only starts to take hold in societies when people start to feel like political change through traditional democratic means is no longer possible. And Americans are right to think that that's the case, seeing as how we effectively live in an oligarchy where billionaires and large multinational corporations dictate all of the public policy that gets passed. It's to the point where we don't even get crumbs anymore. Like, remember when they used to give us some incrementalism, sprinkle some crumbs on us just so we feel like we're fed? They're not even doing that anymore. And just to give you a recent example of how bad things are, look at this headline from the New York Times, which reads, EPA to stop considering lives saved when setting rules on air pollution. In a reversal, the agency plans to calculate only the cost to industry when setting pollution limits and not the monetary value of saving human lives, documents show. I mean, what is there to even say anymore? It's a little too on the nose even for America. So needless to say, the system has completely and utterly failed its people. Other governments throughout history have faced popular uprisings after they weren't able to adapt to the changing needs of its people fast enough. But I mean, in this late-stage capitalist hellscape that we're living in, they're not even trying to adapt. In fact, they're openly defying the masses by cutting our social safety nets even more to pay for more tax cuts for the rich. It's like they're spitting in the faces of a population that is already pissed off. And we've been on a downward trajectory for so long that Americans feel like they have nothing left to lose at this point by rising up. The cost of living is unsustainable, healthcare costs are skyrocketing, and to add insult to injury, the things that once distracted us from our misery are also becoming too unaffordable, like video games and streaming services. So when people no longer have an outlet, bread and circus, if you will, to keep them entertained, when they have no escape, no community, no hope, they begin to fixate on how bad things are, and eventually their anger begins to fester, and it reaches the point where they become consumed with rage and can only think about how much they hate the people in power who are responsible for all of their pain and suffering. And you really get a sense of that feeling of despair and hopelessness from these social media posters.
Fuck this goddamn country, this stupid fucking country that we live in, this dumb fucking world that we live in. In what fucking universe is any of this just gonna be taken fucking lightly?
All we do is work to barely get by. We pay our bills, we pay our rent, and we scrape up the pennies to try to put food on our table. We are not living a dream. We live in the worst nightmare we ever could imagine, and tomorrow's gonna be worse. If we all stand together and say, you know what? It isn't going to get any better. Stop every fucking thing. I don't give a fuck what it is. People are afraid, oh, I might lose my house. You're going to lose it any fucking way. But at least be a man or a woman and fight for this motherfucker while you got the opportunity to do it. But to try to end the shit that we live in, man, this is not living. I don't know what the fuck you call this anymore. Out of all the years I've been on this motherfucking earth, I never would have imagined it'd get to the point where I'm working myself to death.
That last rant was really cathartic to listen to. But this frustration is compounded by the fact that we all know that even as bad as things already are, they're only going to continue to get worse. Year after year, people are working longer hours for lower wages, and there's just no political will to alleviate our suffering even a little bit, because again, the capitalist class demands that we all slave away in order to increase profits for shareholders. Amazon workers are forced to piss in bottles to increase productivity so Jeff Bezos can buy a third mega mansion to temporarily stay in while the other two mega mansions that he built get demolished and then rebuilt into one mega mansion. But as bad as things are, people are still forced to feel thankful for the shitty jobs that they have because In the not so distant future, those jobs could very well be replaced by either automation or more likely AI. So this revolutionary fervor that we're seeing is the direct result of the system's failure. People know that our government doesn't serve us, it serves the rich. So it's no longer capable of producing results. It's no longer capable of producing political change. The question then becomes, though, how do we change or overthrow that system that's oppressing all of us? And the reason why people are forced to ask this question is because they know that the typical answers like protesting and voting no longer seem viable, as explained by these individuals.
I'm not sorry to say this, but protesting ain't gonna do shit. And to the people, call your representatives, get on the phone. For what? Their voicemails are full. They're not available. They're not answering the phones. Tried that already. Then there's those. Make sure you show up for the primaries. That's the only way we can do that. That's in November. This is January. What are we going to do in the meantime? Because ICE is ramping up their efforts. Until we start to associate our actions with what's actually happening, it's going to get worse.
The only reason the Democratic Party exists is so that the people don't revolt. Because the Democratic Party gives us a way to feel good, to feel like change is possible, to feel like change is coming. Have a little hope. And they speak really nicely and they say all the things we want to hear, but then they never really deliver on their promises. They never actually reverse the damage done by the Republican Party. And why is that? It's because the corporations and the elites donate equally between the two parties. And our politicians, Democrat and Republican, both answer to those corporate interests. And if we didn't have the Democrats saying exactly what we need to hear and saying nice words and making bills with nice titles, even though none of that delivers, if we didn't have that, we would revolt. There'd be no outlet. There'd be no convention, no signs, no cheering, no moments of joy, no amazing speech. But at the end of the day, after 250 years since the inception of the United States of America, we don't have affordable housing, we don't have a living wage, and we don't have national health care. In fact, those things keep getting more expensive every year. Oh, but Jeannie, these things take time. Shall we wait another 250 years and just keep doing the same thing over and over again, voting for the same people, expecting a different result? I promise you, if we do that in 250 years, we won't have anything.
And therein lies the problem. People are recognizing that we're trapped in this perpetual cycle where Republicans break the country and Democrats come along right after and promise to fix what Republicans broke, but they never actually do. So how can we even move forward and build upon what little progress we've made when we can't even fix what was broken the last time? It's like we take 5 steps backward and 1 step forward if we're lucky. Like we are truly circling the drain in this country. So how can we expect a real change when we functionally don't even have an opposition party in this country that is willing to facilitate real change, let alone resist fascism? You've got most Democrats openly supporting Palestinian genocide in direct defiance of their base. They arguably lost the last election because of it. Some have even decided to defy the base on trans rights and immigration, which were issues that traditionally they were more humane on. Their thought leaders like Ezra Klein are encouraging them to run anti-abortion Democrats and are calling for even more neoliberalism. You've got Democrats like Angie Craig attending a crypto symposium with Eric Trump, and she also voted for the unconstitutional Laken Riley Act, which denied due process to undocumented immigrants, including Dreamers, along with Jared Moskowitz. But both of these individuals are pretending like they're against the Gestapo that they once emboldened. On top of that, the party's 2028 frontrunner Gavin Newsom spent the first month of Trump's term chumming it up with fascists like Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon, and he's now vowing to stop a proposed billionaire tax in his own state. And I also want to present you with a video of the leader of the Democratic Party with no comment because it speaks for itself.
Should ICE be abolished, Senator? Will you use...
I have lots of problems with ICE.
Should it be abolished?
Thank you.
Will you guys use the appropriate... Will this be a red line in this upcoming funding fight? A lot of people want to know how you guys plan to do this, and will it lead to a shutdown? Will it be a red line, ICE, restricting ICE funding in the funding fight?
The leader of the fucking opposition party won't even commit to try to use his leverage to reduce ICE's funding, even after they just committed an execution in broad daylight. Democratic appropriators like Rosa DeLauro also won't commit to doing that, and as Pablo Manriquez reports, she's not even willing to attach riders to the upcoming budget bill to try to force ICE agents to wear badges or take off their masks. So suffice it to say, this is why so many Americans feel just hopeless. It's why so many of them feel as if the only way to meaningfully affect change is to revolt, because they simply no longer see voting and protesting as a viable way to change things. And I also came to the same conclusion myself after the George Floyd protests went absolutely nowhere. I mean, we saw an international civil rights movement, and it resulted in zero policy changes. In fact, police budgets in cities across the country are actually bigger now. So everything that we're seeing is forcing Americans to grapple with the reality that the system isn't built for them. It was built to exploit them and oppress them and control them. It was built to squeeze as much profit out of them as they possibly can before they die. Hence why people are beginning to yearn for a revolution, because anything short of that simply won't change things.
Bro, I'm just done. I just want to know when the fuck we light the torches and get the pitchforks, because we just need to burn this bitch down and start the fuck over. So, you with me?
I'm slowly coming to the realization that we are the generation that has to do something, and it's one of the most difficult realizations to accept. All throughout history, we've learned and watched some of the worst atrocities be handled by groups of people who had to stand up and do something about it. And I think we've been conditioned to be more comfortable observing from a distance than getting rid of our discomfort. Whether you are pro-life or pro-choice or pro-Second Amendment or anti-guns or religious or atheist, we are living in an era where we have to behave differently right now. We've grown up reading about all of these revolutions and all of these stories of these people fighting back against power. We've watched these movies and TV shows telling these great stories about these heroes that got together and fought the odds. And I think we are unfortunately living in the generation that has to be the people who do that.
Now, to state the obvious, disillusionment with the system is not a new phenomenon. We've gotten clues here and there that that's the case with the rise of anti-establishment sentiment, as well as populist figures like Bernie Sanders and Zohran Mamdani, and also this fundamental distrust of the system itself among the public that we've been seeing. But this mentality has really proliferated in Trump's second term, and it's spreading even faster due to ISIS terrorism across the country. So we're witnessing the culmination of decades of anger towards the system and the ruling class, which has now resulted in a discussion that we're seeing about the efficacy of a non-peaceful response. Now, some people are talking about arming themselves just as a means of self-defense, while others are subtly suggesting that an armed resistance is actually necessary to stop fascism, seeing as how that's how it was defeated back in World War II. But before we get to that, I do want to say that the most common sentiment that I'm still seeing is a call for a peaceful revolution, mass mobilization, general strikes, things like that. And on that note, I want to show you this TikTok that went viral last year, because this woman put together a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation on how to peacefully overthrow the US government. And what she's saying, actually, it is important, because if Americans were able to pull something like this off, it would be effective, undoubtedly.
So there's plenty of companies and plenty of businesses or people that are a part of a union. This is where we need y'all, okay? Like, y'all are going to be the backbone. Y'all are going to be the ones who have to say, we're not working. We're not doing this. We're not coming to work. Again, that's going to have to be the unionized people. I don't have enough experience on that. But, hey, this is a team. This is just a rough outline. We need DEI. These are our demands, okay? In no particular order, but for the healthcare space, we need universal healthcare. I'm done with this affordable, universal healthcare, okay? We are a first world country, and the world's economy is based off the US dollar. There is no reason why every baby in this country shouldn't have health care. No reason at all.
That's just a small taste of her entire presentation. Mind you, I will link you to the full thing down below if you want to hear the rest of her plan. I think that she was cooking, for one. But for all intents and purposes, she's basically describing a general strike, where Americans across the country engage in work stoppages to grind the economy to a halt until a certain set of demands are met. One of them being a universal single-payer healthcare system, which is something that a lot of Americans want. Now, what she's advocating for is more of a political revolution where you keep the same regime as opposed to a real revolution where you get actual regime change. But what she's calling for is a political revolution where changes are made at the institutional level in order to meet the demands of the people. It's a sort of paradigm shift where power is given back to the people peacefully, which is something that can be accomplished if and only if the people come together to show the government that they have the power in the first place, which they do. Like flexing our economic muscle is something that can accomplish a lot of things. Our labor is our leverage, but organizing something on that scale is very, very difficult, which is why we need unions, and she points that out. But this is why capitalists destroyed unions. It's not just because they're greedy and they don't want to pay their workers more and give them better benefits. They destroyed unions because destroying unionization was the fastest way to disempower the working class. And they did that to revolution-proof the dystopian system that they were building. So it was tactical and also useful to line their pockets. And what she's advocating for is theoretically possible, but it's hard to pull something like that off, especially after elites have invested so much money into dividing the American people. I mean, there are so many things that the ruling class, the capitalists, have done throughout the last couple of decades that insulated themselves from that very kind of popular uprising. But others are more openly talking about an actual armed resistance and not a political revolution, which is always a possibility in countries after government institutions begin to break down, which is exactly what we're seeing right now. It's not unique to the United States, of course, but the following people explain why arming themselves might be a necessity to protect their communities from repression, since the state has become openly hostile towards its own people.
Advocating only and solely for peaceful protest is a manifestation of white supremacy, right? Because why is it that people are expected to stay peaceful, but not the people with the guns, right? The people with the monopoly on violence don't ever have to stay peaceful, but we're always expected to be the bigger person to take the high road. The same politicians who demand that you stay peaceful will turn around and use their police force to spray you with pepper balls and to arrest you, right? It is very much a do what I say, not what I do type situation. And I come at this conversation as a Black American person because we've always been told, well, if you just act right, well, if you just do this, we'll treat you right. But they've never treated us right. It don't matter what we've done. Marching in suits or marching, we've never been treated right? So, like, I don't believe, I've never once believed that if we just contest in the way that they want us to, that they'll actually do what they're supposed to.
Hey guys, we gotta take some notes from the Black Panthers about what to do when there are armed men trying to kill you. Because they've been in this fight way longer than you and me. And they know a few things about resisting. And one of the things they were really into was armed militias to protect neighborhoods. And it's time to take some notes. I suggest this book, Black Against Empire.
The United States has gotten to the place that we are today by repeated underreactions to things that are very, very severe, while the people in power continue to escalate, knowing that they will not get the type of pushback from the populace that would make them stop what they're doing meaningfully. On a totally unrelated note, this is the country of the Second Amendment. It's time for you to buy a fucking gun.
Shit, pretty soon this right here, it's gonna be our only way up out of this shit. But ask yourself this, are you really ready for that? Matter of fact, are you even really ready to have that conversation with people?
I think I'm willing to die for this. I'm patient, I'm intentional, and I'm very slow to anger. And if I'm here, I believe that I'm not alone. I would be willing to wager that anybody else who's paying attention is right here with me. I think the people are ready. We're attending record-breaking rally after rally across the country, even the world, but we lack a clear plan beyond basically complaining in all its forms. Why in a country of 341.7 million people can we not find a single voice directing us towards liberty and justice for all? Our senators, our congressmen, our elected representatives represent the highest bidder, not us. The good people in this country aren't asking for another peaceful protest that fizzles out by Monday. We're not asking for catchy slogans or edgy t-shirts. We're asking for direction.
I can assure you that things don't get to this point for no reason. Regardless if you agree or disagree with what they're saying, it's important to understand that this doesn't happen in a vacuum. You can look to popular uprisings and revolutions all throughout the history of the world, and there's always a specific set of conditions in the lead up to revolutions. There's a collapse of social order, widespread fear and disillusionment, distrust in the system, failure or unwillingness of the state to adapt, a growing revolutionary fervor, to name a few. And just purely from a clinical political science perspective, it's obvious that the US has reached that point. We meet the criteria for revolutions. We're ones to be on the lookout for if you're a political scientist looking at countries that might see a popular uprising in the short term. It's obvious that the US has reached that point. It doesn't mean that Americans will definitely revolt, but the signs are there, and government officials need to take it seriously if they don't want that to happen. They need to meet the needs of the people if they don't want that to happen. And the thing to keep in mind is that, as wonderful as it sounds to be free from the clutches of the evil American empire, not all revolutions are successful. Sometimes it really depends on how the state responds to it. If they try to address the demands of the revolutionaries, that could quell the revolutionary zeal. If they try to crush the revolution through force with violence, that could also lead to revolutionary failure, or it could spiral into a civil war. But even successful revolutions where they overthrow their government sometimes creates power vacuums where bad actors rise and come to power, and sometimes that new regime ends up being even more repressive than the last one. And these are all obvious risks that are considered by societies before they choose to actually revolt, which is why there's always so much hesitation and wariness and deliberation beforehand. But I mean, for them to know all of these possibilities and for it to get to that point where they're willing to take that chance and roll the dice, they really have to feel like their current situation is untenable and they can't take it any longer, and that they have no other choice but to revolt. And you really get the sense from a lot of Americans that that's where they are. They're in that state of mind. Despite the risks, they feel like arming themselves is the only way to survive the threat that they're facing. And this was exemplified in this interview from Status Quo. And they were talking to a protester in Minneapolis. And this was directly after Rene Good was executed. And what he says speaks to what I'm talking about here.
And murdering people for trying to flee and for obeying a command to leave the area, and then shooting her in the face like that after she drops her kid off at school. We have to show up with guns. We have to. There's no other way around it. I don't care if I don't have a Minnesota carry permit. I'm unarmed right now, but this is the last time I show up to face these guys without a weapon. There's no way. I got shot with a pepper ball 5 minutes after walking in here. I never laid a finger on them. I never raised a hand to them. I've only been using my voice. The time for speaking is over. The time for niceties is over. The time for peace is over. They fired the first shot. It is time to end this shit by any means necessary.
You're talking about, potentially going to a dark place in this country. Do you foresee...
We're there. This is the dark place. This is the dark time. We have people being sent to Salvadorian concentration camps. We got other countries being raided for their oil. We're in the dark time. There's no way out of this. There's no voting our way out of this. We can't wait till November. There's no waiting to the ballot box. We need to get to the bullet box. That's the only way. If there was another way, I'd be advocating for it. I've spoken peacefully. I've marched peacefully. I marched without Sharpton. I marched on Washington. I've been peaceful. I've acted peacefully. The time for peace is over. The time for any means necessary is right now.
It might be hard for some Americans to hear him say that, and it might even scare them, but his logic is premised on survivability. It's a calculation that he's making. If they're going to assault you already, and possibly even kill you if you're unarmed, then do you increase your chances of survival if you're armed? He thinks the answer is yes. Others would disagree with that because if he shows up in open carries, perhaps that makes him a target of the regime. Maybe they shoot to kill you right away because they perceive you as a threat. But as the woman that we heard from earlier pointed out, the Black Panthers were very successful at protecting their communities by arming themselves. In 2025, Black communities are still doing this. They're forced to protect themselves by arming themselves because white supremacists and Nazis are invading their towns, and they are forming militias to patrol the streets to make sure that nobody can harm their people. In other words, being armed will only be a deterrent and protect you if enough armed people bind together, as the Black Panthers taught us. And I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but that guy's rant echoed Malcolm X's 1964 writing titled The Ballot or the Bullet, where he argues, if we don't do something real soon, I think you'll have to agree that we're going to be forced either to use the ballot or the bullet. It's one or the other in 1964. It isn't that time is running out. Time has run out. He later argues, if you don't take this kind of stand, your little children will grow up and look at you and think shame. If you don't take an uncompromising stand, I don't mean go out and get violent, but at the same time, you should never be nonviolent unless you run into some nonviolence. I'm nonviolent with those who are nonviolent with me. But when you drop that violence on me, then you've made me go insane, and I'm not responsible for what I do. He adds, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I'll link to the full thing down below and highly encourage you to read this important piece of history because it was written at a time when the country was at a crossroads, much like we are now. And they were at a crossroads because of this power asymmetry between Black Americans and white Americans, and that never went away. Right? There's still this racial hierarchy in this white supremacist country, but he wrote this during Jim Crow. And Malcolm X was making the case for proportionality between Black Americans and the US government in terms of tactics, right? So if they're going to get brutalized and killed when they're being peaceful, what incentive did they have to remain peaceful? Why does the state get to have a monopoly on violence? These are questions that activists have always grappled with, and that's still very much the case today as well. But I want to share one last video with you from somebody who confirms that the Trump regime's repressive tactics have unquestionably set the stage for a domestic insurgency. And that's what he thinks is going to happen. That's what he thinks is already taking shape because of what we're seeing. And I think that what he says here is really important.
I'll be brutally honest. I see an insurgency brewing. Because the brutal fact of it is, we are under paramilitary occupation. We are under police state occupation right now. ICE is an occupying force. Our own government has been sent to occupy our cities and terrorize the public. State-sponsored terrorism. That's literally what's happening. So what? Some of them do it in plain clothes, wearing level 4 flak vests and stuff like that under their clothes. Others do it in full tactical gear. Masked, refusing to identify themselves, literally kidnapping people, raping women, and that kind of stuff. Literally ripping people out of their homes, kicking in doors, a direct violation of the First and Fourth Amendments. Refusing to comply with the law that says that ICE has no jurisdiction, no authority to detain American citizens. I could go on and on and on. They're lawless. They're straight up and down lawless. If local and state law enforcement in large part won't do anything about this, they won't rein them in, well, what do we do? Well, I think the only thing that I see coming, and it's not good, is I see a literal insurgency force brewing. You know, I see it. Why? I mean, how can I recognize that? I went to Fallujah, for crying out loud. ICE is not prepared to fight an insurgency. They'll lose. Now, the problem's going to come when they when they use the National Guard. That's going to be a problem for them, not the insurgency. Because the National Guard are people who live in the community. They're not going to be willing to turn their weapons on the civilian populace, and they're not going to, no matter how much they're briefed. A people determined to be free, you can't defeat a people like that. Ask the Russians when they tried to conquer Afghanistan. Ask us when we tried to conquer Afghanistan. You get where I'm going with this? ICE and this administration have backed the American people into a corner. They've declared war on every American citizen, every man, woman, and child in this country. They've branded all of us domestic terrorists just because we disagree with Trump. The entire world is isolating us until we get our shit straight. And the only way this shit is ever going to get straight, since politicians, yes, on both sides, Democrats and Republican, are both in on it, it's going to take an insurgency to get us free.
Yeah. And for the record, you didn't see him say this since I had to edit down his video for time. But if you watch the full thing, which I'll also link to down below, he says multiple times that he's not advocating for violence and he doesn't want there to be an insurgency, but he just feels like that's an inevitability at this point because of the climate that we're in. And deep down, ICE probably feels the same. They also see that as a reality, because the Trump regime is stoking the flames. But even though they're acting tough, deep down, ICE is shitting their pants right now, because reporting from journalist Ken Klippenstein suggests that ICE agents are actually worried about backlash in the aftermath of Renee Good's murder, because opposition to them is at an all-time high, and as a result, DHS's Operation Metro Surge, where they send hundreds more ICE Nazis to Minneapolis, isn't going to plan because they're struggling to find agents who actually want to go there because, quote, there's genuine fear that indeed ICE's heavy-handedness and the rhetoric from Washington is more creating a condition where the officers' lives are in danger rather than the other way around, i.e. they're learning in real time that occupation breeds resistance. So when you act as a paramilitary-like force going door to door hunting down immigrants like Nazis and harassing communities, people aren't going to be so welcoming. And you have to remember that they cover their faces at the end of the day because they're scared. They're afraid of backlash, and they know that what they're doing is illegal, and they fear accountability in the future. So they are afraid, and I think that this report from Ken Klippenstein does confirm that. They know that they're barking up the wrong tree by invading these communities, but Trump is trying to thrust them onto communities because he wants to fan the flames. He wants to see violence because he's a sociopath. But in conclusion, I sincerely hope that the country doesn't devolve further into a state of violence, but I fear, like the guy we heard from, that that is indeed a possibility since the regime refuses to de-escalate. With that being said, I'm not making a prediction or giving you a probability, although I'm sure that Kalshi and Polymarket are already on it, but I'm telling you, as a student of political science, the prerequisite conditions for revolutions have already been met here. And if the ruling class really doesn't want to see a civil war or insurgency or an outright revolt, they need to immediately address the demands of the public right now. They know what we want, they know what we need, and they need to address them right now. Not in November, not in 2028, but right now.
Luigi not happy.
Oh.